Hello. I know this won't help either, but trying to put some word out to get people started somewhere. You're more than welcome to come up. I want to talk to you anyway because I think you should check out something called the onegreatwork.com. Excuse me, the onegreatworknetwork.com. I sent it to you. I think I already did, but it needs the indigenous touch. It goes over anarchy. Everybody in the group in the organization. It's not even an organization. It's a network of independent activists and organizations, but all of them are activists and anarchists and uh, abolitionists. But they need the indigenous touch. There are a few black people on there and a few indigenous. Damn, that's a clean word. It sounds legitimate. Indigenous. There are indigenous-ish people there, I think. But I'm gonna actually go back right now and check. But it is missing the indigenous touch. Yes, come on up, please. You're like, look at the screen, boo. Greetings.
Hello. Yeah, I could stay up for a little bit. I work nights, so I go back to work tonight. But what's it called again?
It's called the Great Work Network. The One Great Work Network. It's a long ass name. Mark loves his long name.
The One
Great Work Network.
Great Work Network.
Okay. Yeah, and I don't even think you need the on there. It's just One Great Work Network. There it is. Yep, One Great Work Network.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I said there's some indigenous people on there, but I'm not sure if they're self-proclaimed or official indigenous individuals.
Mm-hmm.
And there's certainly not enough by any stretch of the imagination. Whether
What
there
are
are
they
any at all.
about?
The entire organization is a group. It's not even an unofficial organization. It's a collective of independent activists, anarchists, and abolitionists. So all of these people are anti-system of government, anti-colonialism, etc. I just don't think I'm not seeing any official, like somebody who is. I mean, I think I did, which is why I'm looking now, and there's more than there was before. But most of these people are reconnectors to their own roots, whether they're black, YT, or otherwise. But like I said, I think they need you specifically because you're versed in natural law and indigeneity and indigenous practices, and I think that's the connect. That it's not it's because these people are very respective of indigenous cultures and colonialism, of how it functioned or how it unfolded. But I think that I'm looking out of all because Evolving Seeds is even listed on here. We're a part of the organization, but we need more indigenous people on
Oh,
this.
but what's the goal of the collective, or what is it doing? Is it just a collective to
It's just a
disseminate
collective for
information, or
information. Yeah, none of what we're doing with the organization is geared toward developing any um, it's all about solutions and the media behind the solutions. But like I said, all of these individuals, and some of them are groups like Evolving Seeds, we're on there, and we are a boots on the ground initiative to actually do grassroots on the ground in community work. And that's not what they're doing necessarily. Some of them do, just like Evolving Seeds does, but as a collective on the thing, it's almost just like a bulletin board for natural law advocates by indigenous titles or otherwise. Because like you've been saying, and this is what prompted me to say this, because one of your videos, I'm going to duet it in a minute, because I tried to do it the other day, but I was in the middle of nowhere and it was taking too long. But it was provocative in its explanation and delineation from the word anarchy. And I've been talking about that. People were like, I've been going to women's spaces and they're like, oh, well, the matriarchy is better than patriarchy. I'm like, yeah, but by that, we're still using that language. So I'm concerned with the archy part, the control part, but that's not what matriarchy would be. That's not what indigenous practices were. And I know that, but using that language, when we're speaking to the general population, they haven't even learned what anarchy means. They don't know what these words mean. They don't know what patriarchy means. So when you come across somebody who is in their development and learning and they hear archy, if they're already moving towards anarchy, they're like, I don't want any archy. Like, we can call it a matri indigenous, matri indigenous, because the archy part calls it, it just for as a person who, it's almost like a religious person who has been so accosted by religion that they don't recognize the binding source. Somebody who's so accosted by school that they start to think that they hate education. We are some people who have been accosted by control so much that we don't want control by anybody. And I know largely, like I said, that's not what the matriarchy would be. Through a traditional lens, but definitely coming out of what we're in, it's just most people don't have a functioning understanding of how to move forward with these concepts, even from within the righteous groups that they're in. But I think that's why, again, your platform is becoming more and more relevant and more provocative, because not only do you have that aspect and the other aspects, and like this is coming from somebody who absolutely don't fuck with nobody in the military unless they're doing the work that you're doing. You are not the exception to the rule. You are the redemption to the rule, because like I have like some of the people on the network are former military, so it's always good to have that, because like no, they can't, the average person can't dismiss you as easy as they can dismiss me. They can't dismiss somebody who served in the military as easily as they dismissed me, from their own admission, from their own understanding of patriotism and all that stuff. So they give you guys way more credit than they give us. But the network itself is just a place where you get more exposure for being a member, and they get more exposure for you being a member. That's really but what you do on your end is still your own activism. So I'm sure there are on this network, there are people who do prepping. There are people who do agriculture. There's people who are focused more on the media, which is a lot of more focused on the media. And then there's groups like Evolving Seeds that are featured on the network who do actual, litter removal, boots on the ground, inter-community work, mutual aid, the whole nine. But it's, for all intents and purposes, it's just an info hub or a bulletin board for not only solutions, but for natural law geared or natural law oriented solutions. But like I said, they need somebody like you, because, and not even they, we need somebody like, I don't even get to say we usually about things, but we need you because you have that. And you can, I recommend, please, I suggest go look it up, deep dive into it. The organizer of it, Mark Passio, I came to his work years ago and have always been, not only, I consider him a mentor, and he's also the founder of the organization. Or the network. That's what I'm gonna call it, because that's what it is. The One Great Work Network. And so they need we need the indigenous aspect. We need the indigenous wisdom. We need the indigenous side of it, because as it stands, when you go to the One Great Work Network and you look at the content creators, it's not Eurocentric, but it's still largely populated by descendants of Europeans, because sadly, and this goes back to how strong this is, there aren't as many indigenous, Black, and otherwise LGBTQI, trans, not necessarily anarchists, because again, even the word, like you say, it's just a rip-off, a cheap knockoff of indigenous practices anyway. But we need more people that are aware of this, and that begins with you and people like you. And so, like it would be great to have you on the network. And again, it's not the network itself, its only goal, in fact, I'll read the about section. It says the One Great Work Network is a privately organized, by Mark Passio and others like myself, collective of conscious individuals who each create dynamic content for the purpose of spreading the message of natural law, truth, and freedom to a worldwide audience. The One Great Work Network is actively engaged in the ongoing war against the dark occult ruling class. Together, this group of freedom advocates and spiritual warriors continually disseminates empowering information in a tireless effort to free humanity from the condition of slavery. So yeah, it's just a dynamic content spreading apparatus. That's it.
Yeah, I'd be interested in looking into it. I know, like, right now, I haven't made fully public of the organization I'm in right now, because we're in the middle of restructuring it completely through indigenous governance. Oh my gosh. We're in the middle of restructuring it into full-on indigenous governance, which is going to be a good thing, but also it's going to be a learning curve for a lot of people as well, because as you can tell, I challenge leftists all the time.
Right.
So I'm like, if I'm going to challenge any group, it's the leftists because I have more probability with getting them to understand indigenous governance outside of, when it comes to the right, the liberals on over, they don't want to hear nothing. Like I can't even talk to them about how voting is colonial, then it starts
Oh, I
becoming
know.
uh black and brown oppression Olympics thing, and it's like I'm not doing that. So but I do have more faith with the left than I do anybody else. But there's still a lot of underlining white supremacy in the left that needs to be addressed in a lot of ways. And like, I said, I have a problem with the left itself unless they are starting to impose or if they're not willing to dissolve the ideology in which they're
Right.
using to fight oppression, in which they're using to be resistant in. Indigenous systems use everything within a toolbox, not just one thing, right? So like, and there's still things like even with my organization when it comes to like certain things when it comes to money, there's only so much we can do as the transition of indigenous governance happens and things like that.
Hmm.
Um, but it's important to start building reciprocal economies. But using these things as
You're
tools is not the issue at all. It's just when, like, as I said, if you're not willing to dissolve itself, once you've reached indigenous governance, once you've reached land back, then that's when it starts, reproducing colonialism. When communists and socialists say, well, this is what we're going to do. And it's like, hold up, you didn't even talk to the people whose lands you in. Hold on, let's slow your roll
right.
first. You know what I mean? Slow the roll. Like, if you want to build your own community, you're still going to have to adhere to the natural laws of the land, and that's going to be set forth by the stewards. And even with anarchists, I've said this to other anarchists before, like, there's going to be um you're still going to have to adhere to the host people, right? And what they're saying is going to be beneficial. So if you're coming up with a project and you go to the indigenous people and say, hey, we're not really well versed, is this going to be good for the lands here? Is this what's going to, are we looking at a future generational plan that's going to benefit everybody, including the lands? If not, then indigenous people should and have the absolute right to say, no, you need to rethink your project, you know? Um,
Right.
and that's where we're coming from. We're not trying to control a large landmass. We don't even want the borders. So it's more of going back to what our original territories were. And then because we know those lands and understand those lands, and just having people coming to us and be like, yeah, this is our little community. This is what we're trying to do to be, eco-friendly. And this is how we want to build our infrastructure. Does it come with a good plan? And getting that permission, because you're still, regardless of how people got here, forced or unforced, you're still a guest.
Right.
And if I'm taken somewhere and forced to live somewhere else, I'm still a guest in those people's homelands. So even if I was forced to go somewhere and live under that rule, I'm still going to follow the lead of the indigenous people of whoever's lands I'm in. That's what's going to happen. That's my personal viewpoint, and I think that's where everybody should start their resistance at, is who are we following, and are we following the leads of the people who are from here? And that's where I kind of try to bring in the opinion that I bring in with the platform that I have, especially on Instagram, that if I'm going to have a platform, I'm gonna be responsible for it. And in that responsibility, it's to challenge people where their colonial mindsets are lying. You can believe in whatever you want, but understand where it can evolve into colonialism and where it can reproduce colonialism if you're not individually decolonizing yourselves, right? And that's my whole point. I know I trigger everybody. I triggered all the vegans the other day. They're all pissed off at me. Uh,
No, I
I'm
saw
like,
that video.
they're all mad at me. I'm like, I didn't even knock veganism. I just said, when it becomes something that becomes a moral measuring stick, when it becomes something imposed on other cultures, that's when it turns colonial. I don't care about your own personal beliefs. I don't care if you don't want to eat meat. I don't care about how you view veganism. That's perfectly fine. But you can't impose it onto other people, and that's my whole thing of why these things start reproducing colonialism, why these ideologies start reproducing colonialism, because it doesn't take into account other cultures, other dynamics, other experiences, regions, all those things, right? So, you know, have your own communities, and nobody can stop you from having your own communities. That would be against everything what indigenous governance is about. We didn't have all the same
Right.
systems. We all had different systems, but they did function under the same principles in the sense of they were relational, reciprocal, they were land based, and so those main things you'll find. I challenge anybody to find an indigenous system that didn't follow those three basic principles along with others, but just those three basic principles. And if
Right.
centering the land is not your objective, then you're already going down the wrong rabbit hole of what revolution is. You know what I mean? So I'm happy to join. Some of them probably have already followed me or seen my content. I don't know. I may have pissed some of them off, but I'm happy to look into it or have conversations. I know I got a lot going on, but yeah,
That's another thing
if
about the
it's
people on the network is they have thick ass skin. Like it's going to be really,
mhm.
really, really difficult to offend them because they're so aware of the ins and outs of all this that when you bring up a situation or if you point out some or try to hold them accountable, they're going to recognize what you're saying because they're versed in the apparatus and how it functions. Not necessarily, they may have never been presented with what you bring up, but they are so well versed in what the system does that they'll be able to recognize what you're saying fairly easy. But that's also my intention and the reason why I brought it up to you because the network can use your expertise.
And I would also suggest, like when you brought up matriarchy earlier, the word I've been starting to use to kind of give it a little bit more distinction, because I think sometimes people don't truly understand matriarchy either. So I use matrifocal.
That's nice.
Matrifocal is a good word to use, and it's not focusing in on any gender, because in a matrifocal society, women and and queer folks, non-binary, LGBTQ, all of the things, that's what's centered, but it's not centered because of gender. It's centered because of motherhood. And that's where a lot of people don't understand matriarchy, because the word itself, like you said, it brings in this connotation of just women being in charge. And it's not about
Right.
women just being in charge. It's about centering motherhood and what motherhood encompasses. And anybody could be a mother, doesn't matter your gender. You don't have to physically give birth to be a mother, but it's what motherhood encompasses. And usually, because women typically are the ones who give birth, right?
Right.
That's what the symbol of matriarchy is usually a woman, but it should be the symbol of motherhood. It's been misinterpreted as just a woman, but it's really the symbol of motherhood, centering land, because land is ultimately the mother, right? So I think it's even in that case, a lot of people don't recognize that part of what matriarchy truly is. It's not about a gender. It's not about women. It's about centering what motherhood is, because motherhood is the embodiment of taking care of all things, right? And still being firm with decisions, still not just being like soft and caring, but also having that firmness, being able to have discipline, all of those things that come into how a mother does. I'm not going to always be lovey-dovey on my kids. There's going to be times where I got to be firm and act discipline, not punishment but discipline, and those types of things. So it's kind of bringing back that sense of what is actual motherhood and what does that look like. And even for those that aren't mothers and those that are from genders that identify with being men and all of that stuff, because if you're a man and your role is to protect in certain cultures, then you can't protect efficiently if you don't have any empathy for the people you're protecting, and you can't have empathy for the people you're protecting if they're not centered, right?
Right.
So it kind of goes like that's more what quote unquote matriarchy is. But because you, like you said, the archy, I always think about the language, and archy tends to always put a connotation, a subconscious connotation of a top-down system. So
Right.
matrifocal is a good way to kind of say the same thing, reframe what people understand matriarchy to be, and then also put a focus instead of a hierarchy onto it, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense, and that's a part of why we have to see. I think not enough people are willing to pioneer. Um, like I just now came up with my own word because I was thinking about people are ambassadors to one country or another. I was like, can you be an individual? Like usually it's a country, and I looked it up. It says it's an appointment made by government for an individual to represent it to another government. And I'm like, well, I'm the opposite of that. Not a group. Or even one person within a group, and I'm not appointed by a government. I'm the opposite. I'm an individual, and I'm against government. So I'm calling myself an ambassador with an I, because it's I who appointed my motherfucking self. People say, who do you think you are? I think I'm motherfucking me to be speaking on these topics. You don't have to be anybody to stand against fucking injustice. And that just goes to the delusion that you got to be some Martin Luther King, or you got to be some tank man, or you got to be some Gandhi, which Gandhi's a horrible example, but you got to be one of these people. Like there's some kind of other breed of human being. No, you just have to be against bullshit. You have to have a backbone. You don't even have to have balls. You can have ovaries, but you got to have a backbone and some guts. I mean, everybody got a backbone and guts. They just got to utilize them. So that's, but Michael, I got you up here. What's going on? How you doing? Everybody tap the screen. I don't ever get to say that because I don't ever have anybody on my platform, but everybody tap the screen. And thank you, Michael, for tapping away. What you got going on?
It's good to see you. I don't really have anything in particular going on. Just thought I'd come up here and listen to the conversation.
Awesome. Because I'm recommending and suggesting and requesting the presence of Notorious on the One Great Work Network, and I recommend everybody check that network out. But more than anything, check out Evolving Seeds, because Evolving Seeds features those other organizations, or features the One Great Work Network. But what makes Evolving Seeds unique within the network is that we are a full spectrum component. So we're attempting to address litter. We're attempting to address mutual aid concerns, disaster relief, resource acquisition, development of actual infrastructures, the highlighting of other activists who engage in health, law, aquaponics, the whole nine. And so our Evolving Seeds is a one-stop shop, and that's why we're going to be presenting people in the background, presenting organizations. Like I'm not even affiliated with 99.9% of the organizations I feature. They're just doing really good work. I used to be affiliated with the General Strike, but I started yelling at people because they weren't fucking intelligent. They weren't informed. They weren't dedicated. They were angry about whatever the cause of the moment was, whatever sparked their interest, but they weren't organized. And so now I still promote, I still uplift the General Strike. They just don't claim me, and that's fine, because you ain't supposed to claim me. I'm not claimable. But the work speaks for itself. So I do recommend that everybody sign their strike card. It's a great way to show solidarity, and not just show it, but engage in it. Because the General Strike does work with a myriad of organizations to uplift solutions.
A general strike can work. We see it across Latin America. They're the OGs of general strikes. But I do agree that the reason why it's not working at this point, and because there is no organization behind it, from what I can tell, if I'm going to be honest, there's a lot of white liberal takeover in the general strike spaces, if I'm going to be honest, because white liberals are getting pissed off that their privileges are being fucked with. So it's not even a white leftist takeover, it's a white liberal takeover of what I'm noticing. But as far as I can tell with the general strike groups is that they just kind of pick a day and then push content to say everybody needs to do a general strike. And that's not organization at all. The way a general strike functions and is successful is by having community support. And you can't, if you don't have the backups for that community support, it's not going to work. If your community doesn't understand what's going on, and if your community doesn't know how it's going to be supported as they strike, because that's what you're asking people to do, right? You're asking people not to show up to work. You're asking people not to do this. Do you know the needs of your community and who can't show up to work? Are you going to be able to help supply the needs of those of the community for those who don't go to work? How are you guys going to collectively do those things, right? So those are like where I have a problem with the general strike crowd right now, is that there's no organization behind it. It's just, here, let me throw up a flyer on social media and then have big content creators push it, and then get mad when it doesn't work because like
Let me
you're not even
address.
engaging in your community. You know what I mean?
I
So if you're
do.
not
Let me
engaging
address
in the
two things.
community, how are they supposed to support you in the strike? You know what I mean?
You're absolutely right. Let me address two things with specifically the organization that I'm presenting, the General Strike US.com. They address everything you just said, and that's the only reason why I was working with them. The general strike, you're absolutely right. The concept, a lot of the groups that are aimed in that direction, you're absolutely right. Like, that's why I'm not affiliated with this one. And on the second point that I wanted to not forget that you made, which you're absolutely correct, you were correct about both points, is that there is a takeover. However, the organization I'm presenting, I am in constant contact with, not constant, I used to be constant contact back, like I said, when we were heavily affiliated, but still relatively good contact with the couple of the main organizers of this particular general strike iteration. And they are hyper aware of the liberal takeover, the quote unquote leftist liberal takeover of white liberals in their spaces. They are mitigating that and trying to transmute that into like indigenous, not anarchist, essentially. But like you said, that's just a terrible word with archy on it. But in those who are aware of more anarchist or indigenous awarenesses and conscious awareness, because they recognize that they can't function from that context, having them mad about their little privileges of the moment and doing little memes and shit. But when you go to this General Strike US website, it's on my website, you go there and it has a myriad of resources, and it does address, and that's how they even got in contact with me, is they were talking, a lot of people were saying, well, what happens when we start striking? We start losing our jobs. And that's where I came up with the main, one of our main initiatives with Evolving Seas, which is an app for all of this work, all of this deconstructing, all of this decolonizing, all of this education, all of this understanding, implementation, tech, and revenue, and putting it into a decentralized app that 100% of the revenue goes to building infrastructure in the real world, sustainable infrastructure for the app users, which is essentially the general public. But they address those things because you're absolutely right. They're not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but they do present and put a bunch of resources on there, decentralized resources that you can download. And it's very easy to digest packets on how you as an individual can unfold a network within your community. And it does address, assessing what your community needs, analyzing what they don't have. How are you going to provide for it? What's the logistics behind providing those resources? What's the logistics behind providing those resources now versus in a general strike? They are addressing all of those things, which is the only reason why I present them or am fucking with them at all. So you were right, and you are still right. They just are addressing those concerns.
Yeah, I've had a couple of people from General Strike USA reach out to me and ask for some advice. But my first advice is always, what are you doing in the community? Like, I get websites and resources and all of that, but how are you, if I go knock on my neighbor's door right now and ask them, do you know about these resources? No, because we all know how social media functions. It functions through, the algorithms. So sometimes just promoting through social media isn't going to get what you need, especially within the communities. People who don't have social media, people like my mom, who's a teacher, who's 60 years old, her algorithm is filled with nothing but teacher art crafts, right? So when I go through her social media, all the things that come up on her algorithm are nothing but arts and crafts. So, how are you getting this information to the community outside of social media? Are you actively involved within your community? Because that's how you're going to get community support. Like one of the things with the organization that I'm with that we're completely restructuring, one of the things is that each chapter's responsibility is to reach out to the indigenous tribes in their community, and start building a coalition and rebuilding relationships. It's about eventually, it's not going to be just about food distribution and clothes distribution, because if I'm going to keep it real, that becomes charity. Charity is patriarchal because it's the savior complex, right? Charity is supposed to be something that's temporary. Mutual aid is supposed to be something that's temporary. These things are supposed to be temporary band-aids, as a community rebuilds and restructures if something happens, like a natural disaster and so forth and so on. So if we're only providing charity work, then we're not helping communities rebuild self-sustaining, efficient communities to be able to start redoing their infrastructure, to be able to tear away from the systems and rebuild their own systems, their own governance within their towns, their communities, their neighborhoods, all those things. Getting people to understand that, because when we look at places like Bolivia is like the size, I think, of like North Carolina or something like that. It's not very big. However, to do a general national strike across the United States is going to require way more organization and way more community building before people can even, like, if I can see a general USA like literally go into one city and get organized in one city instead of trying to organize in multiple cities across the board, then you can spread out even further and further and further out, because now you have a structure to work with, and then you can implement that structure in different places in order to then organize. Because part of how Bolivia's success is, how part of many Latin American indigenous organizations and movements function, is literally through building networks and alliances with each other. So when they pick a day, it across the board, the information gets spread out through their networks, and then that's how the entire country can go on strike immediately at one time. You see what I'm saying? But they've taken years to build these networks and these allies with different organizations, indigenous groups, communities all over the place, in order to say, all right, when the time comes, we're all on the same page. This is what we're going to do. But that's not even organized right now in that level in a city, much less a state and then nationwide. So that's where I try to, the people that I have talked to from General Strike USA, is what are you doing? First of all, boots on the ground in your community. How are you getting the information? Because just doing social media promotion isn't going to get there. You know what I mean? You have to account for people who don't use social media very often, or whose algorithms stay away from all the politics and things like that. Or who don't use their phones like that. Like, not everybody's glued to their phones. So how are you getting out into the communities to say, hey, these resources are available to you? Are you making sure it's posted to, are you working with the media, with news agencies? Granted, most of them aren't for us anyway, but are you attempting to make those tries? Are you putting out flyers? Are you going around and making sure that everybody in the neighborhood has this information? Are you getting to know your neighbors? Are you getting to understand the needs of your community? Are you doing those things? Because those things are important when doing a general strike. Like, those are the important things. Because if I don't know, if I'm going to organize a general strike and I'm just, going to put it out there and be like, yeah, but if I'm going to my next door neighbor and I don't know what their needs are, and I don't know if they're able to do a general strike, and how, and if they want to be a part of it, how am I supposed to support them? That's going to require a lot of networking and a lot of allyship with organizations to make sure all resources are ready to be funneled to where they need to go when that time comes. But that's where I see the organization is lacking. Is it's like, it's not even being, it's just more like, we got resources and spread them out to your networks. Cool. But is it getting to the community? That's the question. Is it getting into the grandmothers and the grandfathers and the college kids that come home? Is it getting into the mothers and fathers who are busy working 2 to 3 jobs? Like, are we getting into the community to find out the needs of the community and
The
those things, right?
specific the specific organization that I am putting up, the they are doing it, but it's very few. So if I was going to give you an honest short answer, the answer would be no. Are they doing those things? But the long answer is a few of the members are doing all of those things.
Yeah,
But
that's the
they
problem. Hmm.
because of a lacking of general participation in any activism concerns, some of the population of the world are still worried about going to their next Starbucks visit with their friends. Some of the
Hmm.
world, you know what I'm saying, like people are still not there and not completely invested in liberation, and that's the problem that they're dealing with specifically, because you're right, they're not doing that to the scale that is going to be required, but the people who are at the head of it are doing it. They are, because and I'll even tag you in their stuff so you guys can communicate, because it's a person on here specifically named Daydreaming, but they're always in the community. They're always knocking on doors. They're always putting a little podium
Hmm.
out in front of the neighborhood and like, come on, and putting a tent up, bottle of waters, come over here and have a conversation, and definitely getting to know the community, and definitely doing that work. They are not just online at all, at all.
Yeah.
They are very well out in there, but it's just there's not as many as necessary.
Yeah, and that's the hard part, is getting people involved. So when you only have a few people in such a quote unquote large organizational network, right? If you only having a few people going out and getting involved in the community, then you got to look at and this is what I told the organization I'm in. What are your goals? What are your alignment? What is everybody? What are all the chapters aligning to? Like, what's your centering there? Where are you centered at? If you're going to have all these different networks within the general strike, cool, but where's your structure at, right? And that's kind of the thing where I tell everybody structure is necessary for humans, because we're social creatures and we do need to have structure. We have to have it doesn't have to be a top down hierarchy, but a cyclical structure is very beneficial into keeping things organized and moving without having a leader at any specific thing, because everybody is responsible for their positions. And when you're responsible for that position, that's when your leadership comes into play, right? So it's constantly cycling out. So if you're, for example, I try to explain it this way, like if I'm going to organize something in my community and I'm the brains behind the organization and I'm doing all the organization and I'm eliciting help and doing all of that, I am the leader for that thing. But if another member of my organization is also going to be doing a program somewhere else and they're running that, I'm removing myself as leader and I'm going under their leadership to help them and help them run their program and things like that. So it's constantly revolving and rotating. But if there's not a structure, if people are just asking for volunteers and not building a structure behind it, then you're not going to get too far. And that's one thing that I find, like with Black and brown organizers, they've realized this over the years and the decades, that you still have to have some kind of structure behind it. Now, which structure you choose, typically it's always been some kind of leftist structure, is whichever structure you choose. But this is where I come in and I say, here's another structure that's outside of the colonial system that you might want to consider, and then look at it from that point of view, and then rebuild using that, and rebuild your communities using that. It's not a structure that is imposed on anybody, but it's just another option. If you want to go with, and I say this to other people, you want to go with your leftist ideology, great, but then don't come crying to me when you're reproducing colonialism. You know, I'm trying to give you a structure that's going to be outside of the colonial system that you can create and organize however you want. You just have to have those central principles in it. Are you centering the land, or are you centering people? Because as much
One
as
of
we
the
want to center
leftists,
people, we can't. We can't center people over land,
one
and
of the
that's our go-to thing.
one of the leftist most problematic issues is that everything is subjective. That's one of the biggest problems. And one of the biggest ideologies that, and most detrimental ideologies that are supremacists, that are YT and colonial, is that not only is truth subjective, but reality is subjective. And that they, like, that's some deep rooted shit, because they base a lot of their interactions or their decisions on how they engage with reality based on that. This is why they're hesitant. This is the main reason why they're hesitant to let go of the system as a whole, is because they think the system is as objective as is necessary for it to matter. Meaning, well, I can't do anything about it, so I have to change it from the inside. Oh, I'll just be on the other side, But that's one of those principles, one of those things that is like at the root of one of the ideologies that they need to get dismantled, because they keep looking at whatever you're telling them as an alternative subjective perspective, as opposed to your perspective on the objective fucking truth. Oh, and I did want to say, tap the screen, everybody coming in, and anybody's more than welcome to come up. We don't do bootlicking around here, but you're more than welcome to come up. And what's your name? I can't see it. Is it Kavatica? Kavatica.
Yeah.
Please go ahead. What do you have for us?
All right. So I guess little background for me is I am a disabled mixed indigenous person with a very long family history of labor organizing in the South. And I think one of the things, again, stressing a lot of my big issue that's always come up whenever anybody talks about what I consider a very rushed general strike goal is that it does not accommodate for the kind of support that is needed to sustain a strike, and turns it into a moral imperative around activism instead about creating dual power and returning community control from capital, and in a way that frees people to create right relationship with each other, with the land. We see this there's a lot of labor history that I don't know how familiar anybody is with anything I'm about to say. I might be preaching to the choir, and that's fine.
Go ahead, say whatever you want, because we don't get no love around here or any population. So just lay it out.
All right. So one of the things that has happened recurrently in the Southeast, where we had some of the first labor unions that ever existed in the United States, where they were integrated and meeting illegally in church basements for decades, starting almost immediately after the Civil War, where there was the largest uprising of workers that happens that people seem to not know about. More people do lately, but when people are like, the National Guard would never bomb us, I'm like, no, they did. That's why everybody's scared to organize, because thousands of people died. At Blair Mountain, for example, but the Coal Wars were a very long, protracted thing that does not just include Blair Mountain. There were also the textile strikes that were started by women textile workers throughout the 20s. I believe that 100 years ago in the Southeast, more people could accurately say what a communist was than the average American could today. And the federal government made sure that didn't happen. And that is why the Klan got so much power reheld, because the federal government would rather hand over that power and erasure of knowledge to the Klan and let them continue their terror than there be actual liberation, actual emancipatory politics happening in the South, where people are organizing across all lines of division, have been for almost 150 years. One of the things in the 30s I also feel very personal. I wrote a song about this that actually is I was gentrified out of the same neighborhood my granddad was born in, and my granddad was born in that neighborhood 100 years after removal as well. So I have a lot of feelings about these things. I've been basically pushed out of a lot of leftist organizing circles in the Southeast, and I don't know why I always forget your name, but yeah.
BG, you just call me BGP.
Okay, so I've loved watching your videos because I felt so validated in everything I've gone through organizing here among leftist organizations, and I'd be like, oh, this is just settler colonialism with a different mask on. Oh, no wonder they hate me. And so it's been your videos have been an amazing source of like me helping get my head on right again after, or the affirmation following a very tumultuous period in my life. But so when it comes to like some of the labor history down here, one of the things that happened, and this has not only happened one time, but one of the things that has happened recurrently is there would be a strike, in a general strike, a wildcat strike, like not affiliated with a union. Like there's a reason those are illegal now because we were doing so many of them. And the union organizers would come down from the north, like the middle class white union organizers would come down and like try to make everything more like quote unquote respectable and do things XYZ way and encouraging certain actions and behaviors. And then when the strike went on way longer than those organizers were comfortable with, going on a year and a half, and people have been evicted from their homes and are living in tent cities that the union's putting up in the meantime, and like getting food rations and stuff like that. And then they say cannot support this any longer, and they move out, and everybody's just left. And a lot of people have died that way. A lot of very passionate organizers with those emancipatory politics died that way. So whenever things are haphazardly thrown out and not planned, not like, here's the idea of what we want to do, and here's the idea of, and we're trying to do this, and the people who are worried about their Starbucks thing or whatever, they're never going to be in that part of the struggle because they do not have the like class interest to do that. They are not the people that are going to be paying the price when things fail either. And so there is a very strong need to be taking it seriously in the sense of these are people's lives. If we actually care about this, do we care about like changing this theoretical thing in ways that aren't effective, but we are putting a moral weight on people about them? Or do we actually care about returning to right relationship with community and with land? And what does that look like? And that starts in practical lived things that do not show up online, that do not show up on flyers or posters even. They show up in conversations, in mutual support, in non-transactional relationships, in building the community and the dual power that is necessary to sustain that long term. Because now we're in a point where the empire is collapsing, whether we do anything about it or not. And the only people who are going to be able to catch us is us. And so I would really love to see a lot more practical and tangible organizing, a lot more conversations with people who have been surviving. That is the other thing about indigenous wisdom, is these are people who have survived for centuries within their own dual power under the constant attack of colonialism and later capitalism. And so the ignoring of that is not, or and the way things get separated from that is not only about, it's not only a problem from just like in general, it's a pragmatic issue as well, because nothing is going to succeed long term without that. You talk about in leftist circles talk about the proletariat becoming fit to rule, blah blah blah. Well, guess what? There is an entire class of people, generally considered the subaltern, that already is doing that and does not, but is looked down upon. Whether that is indigenous people, whether that is working class and well below working class people in Appalachia, which is a very diverse region. I just want to remind that the Southeast is the most diverse portion of the United States, both in regards to ethnicity and ecology. And I'm going to stop ranting now because I've just talked for a really long time, but thank you.
No, you're good. I've been listening the whole time, and this is not a space. I know we're all getting used to having to speed through our shit as if 4 minutes is an eternity, but it's not. It's not. While I've been listening to you, I've been literally just tinkering with my website and just adjusting little things and listening to you. It's not a big deal. No, that's not how I arrived at my knowledge and awareness. And, doing that, I guess, has left my attention span larger than the average person, or longer, I should say, than the average person, because it just doesn't bother me at all. I'm listening to you. I agree with what you said, and I honor you sharing. There's no need to rush. I'm not I don't even know what everybody's issue is with monologuing. I looked it up. I had to look it up. I've been accused of monologuing after 30 seconds, and it says a monologue is 3 to 4 minutes. Stop.
I appreciate that, because I miss these conversations because I can't tolerate most of the leftists in my community anymore because they're little settler shits. Two, and they're not it's also not a thing where I'm going to convince anybody, because I've been having the same arguments with them for 15 years. So, right. It's not I'm refusing to be in dialogue because I'm stubborn. No, I've tried for 15 years, and I, especially now, and now as my health has deteriorated more, partly from not practicing the care for myself that I needed to during a lot of the times I was most active. I realized I have to be a lot more methodical, but no, I appreciate that a lot.
That's my word right there. Methodical.
Yeah.
I wrote a book recently called The Great Work Handbook about the activism. It's an ism, so it's a system, and systems have prerequisites for efficiency. But go ahead.
I don't disagree. I don't even call myself an activist. Other people will, and I'm not an activist. I'm an advocate. I'm not an activist. One of the things that, and I don't disagree with you. You said Kavatka. Sorry, I need my.
No, that's fine. It's a pen name I use. It's Kavatka. So Charlotte from Charlotte's Web. Her full name is, because it has the species of barn spider. and it's Charlotte A. Cavatica. And water spiders in Cherokee culture are big about the water spider in Cherokee mythology is the one that brought the sacred fire back from over the rainbow when none of the other animals could. It was the
Yeah.
smallest little one who said, I think I can. And yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's beautiful. No, I hear your frustrations. I think if you've seen comments in my Instagram is fun. Let me tell you what. I get way more traction over Instagram, and they show out. The left shows out. I'm like, y'all keep face planting into my point. And granted, there are plenty that have been coming into my space and at first may not always agree with me, but then sit on it for a little bit. And then they're like, oh, okay, I see where you're coming from. I'm like, all I'm asking you to process what I'm saying. I'm not saying you're a bad person. I'm saying you're reproducing colonialism. You're still being colonial. You're still, you can't call yourself anti-colonial if you're reproducing it. If you're trying to tell me that, why are you in my comments making arguments for anarchism? Why are you in my comments making arguments for socialism or communism? Like, what? I don't need your arguments because my people don't want to do that. So I'm just wondering why you're continuing to make arguments instead of being like, oh, maybe we should, talk to the people who are from here and see if this is what they want. You don't want to do that. And that's the problem. Like, if you're not willing to do that, then you're just reproducing colonialism altogether. If you're not willing to dissolve, and if you're taking these ideologies as a political as part of your identity, making these politics your identity, then you're already stepping in the wrong lane. You're walking down the wrong path. They should be used as tools, and that's it. I see the flaws in a lot, which is why I would never even advocate any of those systems to indigenous people anywhere. But I also see where there is positives most of the time because it's already being taken from our systems anyway. That can be utilized maybe in different ways per each community, but those are things that shouldn't stay in place and be stuck in place. There should be tools to be used to organize, to step away from the systems and then move forward. But I do agree that because the empire is imploding on itself and we're at that stage of it's ready to, the foundation is very much cracked all over the place and it's rumbling and it's getting ready to tumble itself. There's going to be chaos and people are going to have to figure out how to do things. There's going to be communities that are going to be open in implementing indigenous systems into their communities, and there's going to be communities who are not. And I was actually going to be doing a video on this because somebody asked me what happens when people don't want to decolonize enough, or what happens if they don't want to go back to indigenous systems. Colonialism is what created this in the first place. How do we prevent that from happening? You can't prevent anything from happening. You can defend against it the best way. And as indigenous people here, as many Africans as well, they came in contact with a whole different kind of colonialism than anybody's seen before. And that was because European colonial systems mimic indigenous systems. When you look at from the left to the right, they all mimic our systems. And that's purposeful. And the reason why they mimic is because it has to make it feel familiar. And why it feels familiar to everybody, then you're more likely to assimilate or agree with the thinking instead of challenging it. And because as long as it feels familiar, you feel like you can, have bipartisanship, so to speak. And that's not how that works. So yeah, there's a lot that I think the left has to come to terms with. But I'm seeing a lot more people being like, I knew there was something missing. Like I was trying to figure it out. I've been a leftist for 20 years and there was always something that wasn't right or didn't sit right. And I was like, yeah, because you guys are you're contradicting yourselves. And when you start contradicting yourselves, when your own ideology starts contradicting yourself, then you know that you probably need to re-examine what that is, So I'm just trying to do my part, and let people know, like, don't go around preaching decolonization when you're not even close to what that looks like. You know, you can't be, huh? Go ahead.
Sorry. I was like, I legitimately spent 3 years in therapy working, doing like internal decolonization stuff and like reconnection work before I ever talked about that in public. Like, that was 3 years of therapy that happened in private before it ever became external. And I think the other thing that is when people talk about it too is that when you're like, oh, this is like people, for a lot of people I talk to don't seem to understand that decolonization is a lifelong process that is both internal and external. Lifelong meaning like never finished, and that there is, like, when somebody, like, when I say, hey, this is happening and this is a colonial attitude, it's kind of like not in right relationship. People take it as a moral attack and are offended when it is a pragmatic observation and not a moral attack upon this person, you know, until they like double down and become an asshole about it. And yeah, but
Oh yeah, no, I've had to.
They don't even track that is what's happening. These people, I
Yeah,
always
they
say,
don't.
why am I expected to be civil with someone who has already shown they have no civility? You interrupted me, you were rude, you were condescending. And like, even the troll will sit there and like play victim. That's what it really ultimately goes down to. Yeah, I forgot what Darvo stands for, but that's what it is. They Darvo on you because they literally will take your analysis and throw it back in your face as if you're, like you say, making a moral condemnation when you didn't give them any sign. Your voice, and then of course when they are rude and you retaliate and you double down, then it's like, bro, how you gonna, don't play dumb? You were condescending as fuck. You were rude as fuck, and
I
I
love
still
them.
was operating in equity. Right.
I love them people. They're so
Play with
fun.
them.
I play with them so much. I'm like, come on now. I mean, do you not see what you're doing? And then they're I had somebody with my anarchist video where I read the Zapatista, one of the anarchist videos where I read the statement from the Zapatistas back in 2002. And they still feel the same way. You know, they're Zapatistas. They don't want to be labeled under anything outside of that. And so I said, so the Zapatistas are the Zapatistas. They are not anarchists. They are not Marxists. They are not communists. They are none of these things. And someone came into my comments and said, so they're anarchists. I was like, I literally just said they weren't. Well, that's the most anarchist thing you can do, is not put a label on yourself. I go, yeah, you're over here labeling them. Do you not see your contradiction? So, you know, it's kind of like those things where it's like, it's typically younger people too, like these young kids who are trying to find their way, these like 19, 20-year-olds who have this like they romanticize revolution, right? Because they study the works of like Fred Hampton and a lot of young revolutionaries, and they want to be like them, so they're like trying to emulate them. But I even tell like my organization, I go, you got to remember, these were younger kids with not a whole lot of life experience. And they also were following leftist ideologies that sounded really good because these are younger kids with not a whole lot of life experience. But when you get older and you start seeing the error of your own ways, start having more experiences with a lot of other people and cultures and encounters and organizing and all the things that come with that, then you start seeing things in a different light. You start seeing where, oh, maybe I could have done better. This is why so many of these organizations from the civil rights movement had issues with misogyny and patriarchy. You know, so there was a lot of decolonization that hadn't been occurring within the organizations, but more on a superficial level. And this was across all the boards, even AIM, and we're still having these issues. So one of the things that I tell my organization is that, you know, this doesn't make us bulletproof. It does allow us to put a bulletproof vest on to protect vital organs. Doesn't mean we might not get shot in the leg and sustain a wound. So, but I'd rather sustain a wound and heal from that than take out something that's vital and we have a fatality. So a lot of these systems, and I say that even with indigenous systems, we were disrupted because we were coming across a psychology we had never seen before. They took colonization and they still do it the same way. That's what shock and awe is. They go in with a brutal force initially. They're immediately physically brutal to create a fear. And then from there, then they come in with their priests, their friars, basically your liberals that are nice and about social justice. And they bring them in and they start to mimic the systems. And then it's much easier to assimilate. Most of colonization was through psychological warfare. Most of it was done through psychological warfare. Even to this day, CIA ops, it's mostly done through psychological warfare. So, because of that, I think now the difference is how do we stop colonialism now we should, if we're doing the decolonization work and the healing work, we should now be able to understand what those red flags are, right? So if it's like, I take it to this, like if you grew up in a family that you didn't have to deal with a whole lot of abuse or narcissism or anything like that, your typical childhood trauma type of stuff, but that's not too bad. But like, if you're not dealing with full-fledged emotional, physical, mental abuse and narcissist, then the moment you meet somebody who is, sometimes you're not going to recognize those red flags right away because you've never actually experienced it or come across it. So now that we can have the tools that help fight against that. And and see where those red flags are, see where it starts to infiltrate into the organizations, into the communities, see where people are needing to be checked on what their responsibilities are versus their authority, are used, all the things that should be done aren't being done because we've been conditioned in a certain way. So, it's going to require work, and there's going to be people. And I say, if the people that choose to do anything outside of land back and returning back to natural systems, then let them collapse and let them fail. Because they will. They always do. The reason why European colonialism has lasted so long is because they did the one thing other ones didn't do, and that was mimic. But now we know that they mimic. So now we got to protect against that. We protect against that. It's much harder to break us because now we're a stronger community because we understand those red flags much easier than before. You know what I mean? That makes sense. I don't know. Sometimes I ramble too.
No, that makes complete sense.
You
That
guys
is,
are not rambling.
yes, that's
I have
exactly
three
that.
things. I want you to be able to speak because I actually have 3 questions. 2 questions. 3. One of them, BGP, what if there is an indigenous, if I could list one main indigenous, I'm going to be doing more, but if I could list one main indigenous organization that represents or can represent much of the diaspora and the educational content, where would that be? Where would you send me?
There isn't one large organization like that. There's multiple. It depends, because a tribe itself may be just doing its own organization and fighting its own fights, especially when it comes to certain things, when it comes to land back. Then you'll have like detribalized organizations like Brown Berets, Young Lords, things like that as well. Or people that are just involved in community organization that are indigenous. You have the MMIW movement that's more kind of national, but even then it's not. It sometimes speaks about Southern indigenous femicide, but not always. So there's even work within the indigenous community that needs to happen, which is like why I'm telling my organization that they have to, part of the thing that they have to do with each chapter and wherever their chapter is located, that they have to build relationships with the tribal natives of that community, of that area, of the lands that they're in, right? Because we're all displaced. So even me, my people are from northern New Mexico. I'm in Colorado, but this is you in Cheyenne territory over where I'm at. So, you have to be cognizant of the lands that you're in. and speak to those individuals, because the diaspora is so diverse, it's hard to have like one. It's hard to say that there's one actual organization that represents it all. I think Land Back is probably the most diverse out of all of it, and Land Back would be the movement that I'll stand on this 10 toes down. It's the only inclusive global movement out there. There is no other movement that is more inclusive than Land Back, because Land Back incorporates liberation for all. Once the land is free, the people can be free. That means returning land to all stewards, no matter what part of the world they're in. If you are a steward of these lands and you are in those lands, then the land should be returned back to the stewards, period, point blank. And we should be following those laws of those people. So I think if you want to use one, Land Back is it. There's no actual organization around it. It's just more of a movement in itself, if that makes sense. And
It
that's
does.
another
I was
thing. I
looking
find a
for.
lot of leftists don't know what Land Back is. So that's another thing that the messaging, I'm trying to help promote the messaging in Land Back and what that actually looks like, because a lot of people have a lot of misconceptions behind Land Back.
And that's one thing I wanted to, like a directory. So while you were talking, I did look up Land Back as a generality, and there's something called culturalsurvival.org. It's
Yeah.
promising because it's an org, but it is about Land Back, and I'm just really looking for a directory or to list the top 5 most successful in my decolonizing section.
Yeah,
FYI.
it's very dependent, because you'll have like tribes, like I think in California they just secured like something like 500,000 acres or something like that. So different tribes will come together as well, and organize just within the tribal networks, and don't organize necessarily outside of the tribal networks. So it's real hard to say exactly, which ones. But there are organizations that do focus on Land Back. But everybody has their kind of own way of promoting it, so to speak, because it's not an actual organization. It's just a movement that people are getting behind. And when more people understand what Land Back actually looks like and what that actually means, then I think we'll have a stronger presence and force behind the movement itself. Because right now, like I've asked the question, or I've had people even come in and ask me in comments all the time, well, what is Land Back, or what does that actually look like? Or assume that someone actually told me Land Back was anti-Black. I was like, how the hell did you get that? Because it's assumed that it's just a transfer of ownership of land, and then we're in charge and everything that we say goes. And that's not at all what that means, you know? So it's about freeing the land and being stewards, meaning that you can create your own community. We have no problem with all Black communities. We have no problem with any of that. You could create your own community. Matter of fact, you'll have your actual liberation, because Land Back means that we get to steward the lands. We get to say how the lands are treated and what projects are going to be approved, because if they're going to harm the lands, we're not going to approve them. That's all we're telling you. How you build your community, what your culture looks like, all the things. That's on you. If you collapse, you collapse. If you succeed, you succeed. If we can be allies, great. And allies in the true sense of the word, and not this transactional shit that everybody falls under when it comes to allyship, right? So true reciprocal allyship, even better. And as more communities do that, even greater. But the ones that don't, we're not responsible. That's part of the colonialism, is we got to remove the savior complexes. We can't go save everybody. We can't change everybody's mind. People are going to have natural consequences and figure out that without the power that they've been holding behind them this whole time through colonialism, without that, they're nothing, and they're going to collapse. And this is why it's collapsing now, because these systems are unsustainable, because they're colonial. And so we're seeing it. We're seeing the climate change. We're seeing how they're unsustainable in many ways. So, people are going to have to figure it out. I've chosen to understand that part of the decolonization was letting go of that. I got to change everybody's mind. No, I don't. I only got to change the minds of the people who want something different. I got to show them something new. If you don't want nothing different and you're stuck in your ideology, cool, go over there. But the moment you bring it to my people, you're going to get a fight. It's going to, And I think the other thing when I studied the history of all of these organizations and movements and everything, one thing that everybody not failed to do, but didn't do in particularly well was organize around defense first. Everybody tries to organize around community, but you can't organize around community until you have a defense for the community. And so organizing around defense is very necessary so you could defend the community that is trying to step away from the system. And it doesn't mean violence. Defense doesn't mean violence. Violence is something that is perpetuated onto other people. It's not something that if you use violence as a defense, it's not violence. It's defense. You're protecting yourself. So the one thing that I do, especially when it comes to the men, because the misogyny and the machismo and all of that stuff comes into play, I'm like, if you're exuding violence in the form of trying to wipe people out, you're being colonial. Violence, if you're defending yourself and exuding violence to stop the threat, that's as far as you go. You only exude enough to stop the threat and you don't continue on. And so that's the other part, is getting people to kind of remove like how you deal with conflict and confrontation and all those other things. If you want to go have your whole white supremacist little town over here, cool, go do that. But I promise you it won't last long. You know, it won't last long. So that's what I think part of the decolonization process in the organization, where a lot of people get burned out, is that we're trying to convince a lot of people that don't want convinced right now. So then let them fail, let them fall. That's what natural consequences are. You know, I'm not going to punish you, but I'm not going to let you into my space. You can stay over there and go figure it out and do what you got to do. You know, and that's one of the biggest things where burnout comes in with activism or with advocacy work or organizational work, is that we can't change everybody's mind, but we have to defend what we're building and what we're doing. And we have to defend not only the physical, but the psychology behind it. And that's where why a lot of these organizations or movements tend to fail at some point, or just kind of veer off into, you know, they start off strong and then eventually veer away and they lose traction, is because now you have that psychology that's infiltrated and you haven't dealt with that. And that's because you're still using colonial systems to structure your organizations or your movements. If you're using indigenous ways to structure it, you're way more well prepared psychologically, defensively, and then you just got to create your physical defense behind that, if that makes sense.
It does. And then my other question was regarding why you don't consider yourself an activist. I was hesitant to ask because I'm very passionate about the subject, but we are adults. Because you said that you were working with an organization. So that means you are officially, for all intents and purposes, an activist. So I'm just curious as to why you don't identify or why you don't resonate with the term.
I think it comes with a lot of connotation and expectation. And in my opinion, activism work, I'm not against it, but in my opinion, I think it just becomes, it tends to become very performative. Whereas in advocacy work, you have to actually get in and advocate for people, right? So it's a little bit different. To me, I see activism as the people organizing things like general strikes or protests or things like that, which are necessary. Not saying they're not. But the difference for me is where the advocacy comes in. Like I personally am advocate. Like as a nurse, I'm an advocate. Every day when I go in and see my patients, this is daily work. If something's wrong, their insurance isn't doing this, or the medications are getting here and they're supposed to be here, what happened? Like all the little things that happen. Okay, let me get on the phone. Let me advocate. Oh, well, we can't get it out there. Well, this person really needs it, and this is what happened, and da-da-da-da-da. Well, maybe, okay, yeah, we can, okay. So just a little convincing, I've advocated, and I've been able to get the medications out there now versus 6 hours from now, right? Like certain things that you don't look at as activism because it's daily work, it's daily advocacy, it's daily sticking up for the person that can't stick up for themselves. And that's why I choose to call myself more of an advocate versus an activist. I think activism is more public, which is cool. We need them, but advocacy is more personal to me, if that makes sense.
I'm going to jump in really quick because I
Makes
was going to
perfect sense.
say that absolutely makes sense. I think that for me, like adding on to that contextualization of that is for me, I view things as like a core goal of activism being to funnel people into paths that are accessible to them for long-term consistent advocacy. Whereas like a rally, a protest, XYZ is a first step. Sometimes people are like very passionate about something. You have younger kids getting involved. I was once one of those younger kids. And there is a very big thing that I think is related to psyops and the internet, and especially et cetera, but where then the protest is like it, or this one campaign is like it, and that's part of why these things, or it's a big reason in my opinion why these things keep failing, is because of the lack of structures that we have that help support people in participating in long-term advocacy following that initial event.
That's beautiful, and that's very valid, and that's the whole reason I asked. Because yeah, it had the connotations that are associated with the word are terrible, and I've approached all of these. I've gotten where I am from analysis. I was on a panel earlier. There was an all indigenous panel, and through my rhetoric, they were able to understand that I was someone who is respectful of indigenous practices and land back in the whole nine. Just the way I spoke about it. Because they asked me a very specific question. They're like, "Are you for land back?" And I was like, "Or do you think you from here?" Or something like that. And I was like, "I recognize that land back is integral to what we're doing as a species." But they said, "Oh, so you're an advocate, or you're a." It was a certain term that they used. It was like you're a benefit to the indigenous community. And I was like, I didn't say anything, but in my head, I'm like, no, I'm a, whatever the word they used for the truth. And the truth is that indigeneity and land back are all integral parts of the way out of what we have found ourselves in. But it's more of me being an advocate for the truth. And the only reason why I love the term activism is because of the ism part. It's just a system of being active. And I know they obfuscate everything, but they obfuscate everything. So I want to claim certain things because they, in their rightful context, they are pure forms of a description of the pursuit of truth, the pursuit of equity, the pursuit and utilization for the tools of empathy and equity and sympathy and sustainability and all of the efficient, optimal operating parameters of reality. And so that's where it comes from for me. And the reason why I want to reclaim activism as a term so bad is because it has been bastardized. At one point, when I looked it up on Google, it said this is as simple as it said, and I quote, "Someone who campaigns for political change." Like, stop. So
Yeah.
yeah.
No,
So I'm
I
glad
hear
you guys
you.
laid that out.
It's kind of like with anything. Like I'll talk about like leadership and be like, there's a colonial way of leadership, and then there's an indigenous way of leadership. And understanding those differences will change your whole viewpoint of what leadership looks like. Like words, language, all of that stuff matters, right? To kind of and put it in a little bit of perspective, like when we talk about natural law, like a lot of people like natural law is colonial. Yeah, because you've been taught pseudo natural law. Hold on one second. Let me deal with my dog.
You're okay. I want to ask a question especially if you can hear me while you're doing that. Is that I looked up, what did I Google? Tribal Organizations Directory, and it gave me the U.S. Department of Interior, Indian Affairs, which seems pretty offensive. But
The BIA.
yeah, I'm looking
Yeah.
for.
That's
Is that a
all
good place to
corrupted.
start?
No, that's all corrupted.
Yeah,
The
it's a
Bureau
fucking
of Indian
system.
Affairs is, yeah, It's one of
It's in
the,
the title.
yeah, it's supposed to deal with all Native treaties and affairs and sovereignty issues when it comes to Native people, with the federal tribes. They used to they relinquished that control back to the tribes, but they used to set the standards for blood quantum. But then they relinquished that control back to the tribes to set their own blood quantums.
Accurate.
So yeah, they're the ones who also help determine whether a tribe can get federal recognition or not. So yeah, that's a whole corrupted system
So
right
this is
there.
They
going to be a little
also
task.
handle any of the potential benefits when it comes to like healthcare and funding around healthcare, and do a bunch of like garbage shit around that. And
Yeah, yeah. It's all corrupted shit. It's all part of the U.S. government. It's basically the U.S. government's little department that controls native sovereignty, that keeps it in check, so to speak. It gives enough crumbs, like manage the NHS and those things, but then, or the IHS, the Indian Health Services, they'll manage those things and distribute money out to the tribes and things like that. But outside of that, like, it's just a whole corrupted system.
if I remember right, wasn't it them that when the Navajo Nation asked for aid during COVID, they sent body bags instead?
I think so. Yeah. Yeah. So it's always been, and they tried to rectify it during Biden's administration by putting what's her face in charge of the BIA. She's running for governor in New Mexico right now. I can't think of her name right now. She's Dene. No. She's Pueblo, I believe. But they try to rectify it by doing that, and she was able to get things like the boarding school investigations going and stuff like that. But I mean, as I always say, putting us in these positions doesn't give us as much power as we think it does. So she was only able to move so far. And when she held that position of being the director of the BIA, they thought, if we put an Indian in charge, then it should run much smoother, and we should get things done faster and easier. But she ended up coming across, what her peers, her colleagues, and those above her, they would only let her do so much and allow for so much. So you can even be the head of a department and still not be able to make the change you want to make. So,
That is
because it's
so
all working within
true.
the system. Yeah.
That is so true. I think whenever I was looking at the stuff, it seemed the thing that she was allowed to be most successful in is the changing of place names and removing the S slur from a bunch of place names, which there is a ton of research on the effects of Indigenous mental health in women in places with that S word slur place name, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that's cool, but I think it's also a really depressing, display of this is only as how much power the federal government will ever allow us to have under that system.
Exactly. I mean, even look at with Barack Obama. Everybody's like, yeah, we had the first black man. Okay, but y'all didn't let him do shit.
Well,
Okay,
but
He was the
seriously,
leader of the free world. He literally was the leader of the empire, and he still couldn't do anything because they wouldn't allow him.
Real quick though on Obama though, because Obama was always center right, and leading up to that nomination, the Democratic in 2008 or leading up to 2008, the Democratic Party expunged everyone to the left of Bernie Sanders from the party to make Barack Obama look more left, when there were tons of actual center left, left of Bernie Sanders, black Democrats they could have nominated instead. And so they did the consistent thing of using emancipatory rhetoric to continue colonial and capitalist interests.
But even Bernie isn't even left, and that's the funny part.
He's not.
He's like center right, and Barack is even further center right. He's right in that middle of. He's a liberal, and so you get I think, I say, like, even if, when it comes to putting black or brown people, even at the highest seat of the land, you're still going to be limited because they're going to utilize checks and balances at that point, right? Of course, that's what they're going to do. But they remove checks and balances when it's their own. And so that's and that's where people aren't like getting it when I'm saying like I don't care if you vote, but you're not changing nothing with your vote. It's symbolic at the end of the day. That's all you're doing. It makes you feel good. It makes you feel like you did something, and it makes you feel morally superior to everybody else when, the vote didn't go your way. So like we don't have any control. We can't be. And I used to think the same way. I used to think that, if we just get in there, we can be the Trojan horse. And we're not. We just kind of, in some ways, keep things in balance, but mostly just keep dissent from happening is what it comes down to. So like, it's the breadcrumbs that happens. The system, no one person is larger than the system, and that's what people don't seem to understand. And that's why I have a problem with leftists, because I don't know how many leftist candidates have been in my DMs asking me to advise their campaigns. I was like, I am completely against voting. Why would you ask me to advise on your campaign? Well, we want to have a more decolonized platform. But you're trying to win a position in a colonized system. You can't run on a decolonized platform. But I want to run on land back, and I want to run out, but you can't because once you get in there, you're going to be consumed by the system. What are we talking about here? So are you doing this to actually, are you doing this for liberation, or are you doing this for a position? To say you were the first? Are you trying to put yourself in the history books? Because that's what it looks like to me. Right? I'm not going to advise on anybody's campaign because everything that you're doing is still going against what I stand for. If you want to talk about, what's the word everybody uses? Radicalization. I don't view liberation as radicalized, but everybody talks about the left is a radical. What radicalized you? Nothing radicalized me. I believe in freedom. Freedom should not be something that's radical. We're living in radicalization right now. So it's not what radicalized me, it's what freed me from radicalization. I'm not radicalized. But if we want to go that route and use that term, then I'm way more radicalized for your campaign. And I promise you, it'll put the type of eyes on you that you don't want, because you're not the threat. People like me, people who advocate for complete abolitionism, people who are advocating for full-on land back, we're the threats. The left isn't the threat. The left is the boogeyman, but it's not the threat. It's not the thing that they're afraid of. This is why they G-side everybody. So getting people to understand that and bringing their egos out of activism is another thing. That's why I don't like to really say I'm an activist, because there's a lot of ego in it. A lot of ego in it. And even with restructuring an entire organization and helping with that restructuring of that organization, there's a lot of egos that still had to get checked and are still going to get checked when it comes to certain things, because you're just not used to that, and you have to deconstruct that and remove certain things that people aren't used to doing, and it feels natural, but it also doesn't feel comfortable. So activism has a lot of egos in it, and you see this more so with what some people have called me a social media activist. So with social media platforms like mine, you'll see a lot more performative shit that goes on. And then you'll see the scandals that happen with like, oh, this content creator and they did this and they got caught saying this, and well, of course, because they ain't decolonizing. It's all been performative, right? This isn't, what are you doing? So Like there's a whole lot there's a lot of ego in it because they're gonna go out there. Like what's happening now with Delaney, with the Delaney ICE detention center. All these content creators are out there reporting. They're all of a sudden all reporters and they're reporting on the news. But the people who've been out there, boots on the ground, who have been filming and uploading, they're not getting the traction. So you're not coming out there to actually be in the fight. You're coming out there to get views. You're coming out there to perform. You're coming out there to you know, that's what I don't like. That's what I don't like seeing. And that's where activism goes wrong all the time. So it becomes this performative bullshit that I can't stand. So part of indigenous
Yeah.
governance removes that hierarchy, right? So you can't, it removes the ego. Because your ego comes with the position and the title and the authority.
Mhm.
So you remove the position, the title, and the authority, you can't have an ego behind it. And that's why I like advocacy, because that doesn't require ego. You're advocating for somebody other than yourself. You could do self-advocacy, yes, but most advocacy work is for others. You're not doing it for you. You don't get any benefit from it. With advocacy, you're helping to benefit and help uplift and give a voice to the person that you're helping to advocate for, and to bring them out of the, you know, from falling through the cracks. That's advocacy. Activism is ego in my opinion, in many cases. So when you remove ego, then you don't really have activism. Now you have advocacy.
I really think that removing of ego is one of the very most important and most needed things. And people's seeming inability to do that has been one of the biggest like obstacles feel like I've faced both in personal relationships when the political is very personal, like, and affecting like your ability to be alive. And also, but also seeing these organizing meetings where something beautiful could have been built in the pocket of something and it can't, because there's too many egos in a room clashing, destroying their own interests and stated goals, which is one of the reasons I said, you know what, I don't care about trying to figure out if somebody is like an agent saboteur or not. They're acting like one, and that's all that matters, and I'm just not going to be involved in that. But I like what you said about with how they're all coming out like, oh, we're doing journalism, but they're not. Like as a student, as a previous student journalist from a bajillion years ago, I was literally like driven out of my university following a combination of my father's passing and my political arrest as a student journalist. The charges were dropped a year later, but the school did not want me there, and the director of the program was using basically there were also like ableist things that seemed ableist at the time, but they was that mixed with, we want this person gone because they cover too much and it's making our funders in the local businesses mad. I didn't think I was that influential. I still don't, but apparently my professors were hearing about me at conferences. So that was weird. Still don't have my fucking degree, but I am grateful for the connections I still have in those things. And I've been in a process of, through my health stuff, figuring out how can I return to writing in a way that doesn't depend on the ableist and colonialist approaches that remove the capacity for that writing to be truth-telling, but also protect like my very limited energy reserves, because I'm seeing so much happening now in younger organizers trying to organize, or like the ones that are not being performative, the ones who are trying to actually organize and are getting caught up in the mess of everything. I'm watching the same mistakes from 15 years ago playing out in front of my eyes, except now I'm I'm 15 years older. And my 15-year anniversary of my arrest is coming up this fall. And I have been putting an article on like a retrospective on a back burner forever. And I'm seriously considering trying to actually approach that. But the more I listen to y'all and participate in conversations, the more I think I'm going to move it into a series and it be a lot more personal and observational than quote unquote objective journalism. Objective journalism doesn't exist. My favorite quote I ever heard in the communication studies, and I forget who this person was quoting, but they said the myth of objectivism in journalism prevents any emancipatory politics from arising within journalism, which is wild because the origins of journalism have to do with the penny press, which was highly ideological, broadsheets. And
Give me 1 second. I did want to say one thing, and I got people here who are doing plumbing, and they
I'm
literally
sorry.
just told me to. No, you're okay. They told me to turn on every fucking, every faucet and flush every toilet and shit. And then I had a fucking small spill out of the sink because it wasn't draining fast enough, which is super wild that all that happened. I've been listening the whole time. I got headphones on, but I wanted to say that advocacy. I love activists, and I don't have a problem with ego as long as it's not the false ego. The false ego is what is resistant to correction, accountability, responsibility, etc. But the true ego, I don't really have a problem with it. I love everything that I have presented in regards to my work, and I know that's not just what the ego encompasses, but I don't have any problem with any form of ego except the false ego. Number one. But then number two, the word advocacy, considering yourself an advocate, I've always said that. And then I was in a space, My Name is 3, and he was talking about the position you're advocating for, He says that a lot. And I'm like, bro, I'm not an advocate for this system. And he's like, bro, you are advocating for this system. You participate. And I looked it up, and from the definitions that I saw, advocate literally can include things that you actually hate. As long as you're participating, whether willful or not, you're advocating for it if you're participating for it. And I'm just like, that's sick. And I don't like that. And I just didn't know that. And that's the only problem I have with the word advocate. The only reason why I like activist is because I'm a Captain Planet aged baby. I watched Captain Planet, and them motherfuckers was activists. Flat out. They had the rings, and they heart, fire. Like I'm that.
No, I feel you, and I do agree with you on the ego part, because there is a difference between a false ego and a true ego. I think that's probably part of the problem with all the labels and the self-identifiers and things too, because of that, there's always going to be how one perceives it. Which is why, like, when people are like, I try to ask people, how do you identify? And then, if it's politically, I'm like, how are you identifying that politically? Because, like, I could talk to an anarchist, right? But there's, like, I don't know how many different forms of anarchy out there. I recently found out that there are anarchist capitalists, which is weird to me. I don't even know how that functions, but okay. But
They even
hey,
have a stupid abbreviation. They call themselves anarcho-capitalists, which is just dumb.
yeah.
I had someone who's my best friend now used to identify as that, and I quickly disabused them of that being a logical notion.
I did want to say hi to the new guest, or the Network of Awareness, one of our features that we do on Evolving Seas, and honored activists and entities that is doing the works. How you doing?
Peace and greetings. I'm doing well, brothers. It's good to see you doing live. So I just wanted to stop by and support. I think this is the first time I've ever seen you go live. So just wanted to stop by.
Thank you. I go live. We don't always get the numbers or the traction,
But sometimes, especially at night, I'll go to sleep and I'll have a myriad, most of our works, presented in playlists that I have on the Evolving Seeds YouTube. I'll throw them on and go to sleep and just have the wisdom going in the sleep. You know what I'm saying? Having a good time while I'm asleep doing the work.
Absolutely.
We've been having a discussion on the effectiveness of activism. We've been having a conversation on the etymology of these words and how they actually function and are they effective? And what about most of what we're doing, even in the like, we haven't even been discussing what the enemy is doing and what the purveyors and proponents of the enemy have been doing at all, like this entire discussion. And the heat, the smoke is for the so-called activist community because, I mean, all of the things that we hold dear has been done by what I would consider activists. People, even if you like to engage in an herb, if you can legally engage in that herb in your location, that's not due to a specific race or a gender or any of that. It's specifically due to the activists of those. So if you are able to enjoy the ability to believe whatever you want, or engage in whatever kind of relationships you want with whoever, it's not because of some order follower unaliving overseas for oil that grants you that ability, or not even grants it, but protects that ability. It is activists since the dawn of time. I would argue that every nice thing we have is because of an activist. It's somebody who took their passion, their dedication to, and put a structure, a set of principles to what they were doing so that they could accomplish it, which is why they accomplished it. Even the person who invented the motherfucking wheel. So, and it's intrinsic and inherent to us as beings. I actually recognize that every human born is a scientist until they are, classified and dehumanized and brainwashed or indoctrinated. They are a scientist. There's not a single person in existence that thinks that doesn't employ the scientific method. It doesn't even matter if they are a presumable psychopath or sociopath. If they are able to, or if they are a functioning human being, they employ the scientific method. Maybe not consciously, maybe not by title, but definitely they employ the method, not science or scientism, but the method of, observing, asking a question, forming hypothesis, experimenting, forming conclusions. That in that order, every human being does that. But the system has these labels and titles and adds the credentials. But we have been talking about why and how these several types of movements, the myriad of movements. And I did an article about this, that there's not a myriad of movements, but they're all branches of one tree that is a movement. And why have we not been more effective? And a lot of times it just boils down to numbers and attention, because there are those of us out here who are very concise. I would argue we are at the tip of the spear, a very small, puny spear, but we're at the tip of that motherfucker. The reason why it's sharp at all is because of us. And I'm talking about present company. So that's why I feature the work. And BGP, if you need me to present anything, if you just want me to present your works as your videos or your TikTok platform or whatever you're doing, you let me know, because it's important. Like I said, your particular, not just your angle, but your particular lived experience and your background is very powerful to your message and to the message of truth. And natural law and indigeneity and indigenous practice. So if you have anything you want me to present, even if it's somebody else, some other organization, any recommendations that any of you guys have for presenting activists or organizations that need spotlight, that's what Evolving Seeds is for.
No, absolutely, man. You're more than my platform's public, so you're more than welcome to feature whatever you like or whatnot on yours. I'm cool with that. But yeah, I think the labels, I think kind of the beauty of the labels and the issues with the labels is that you can you can reclaim it into what you want to reclaim it into, right? And but the problem with it is that everybody is going to have their own idea behind the labels and what that stands for and what that looks like, and that's going to be based off of experience. So I completely understand like your reasoning behind using the word activist, and I don't disagree with it at all. I think that a lot of things were very much people without egos, which is why the things that we have gotten, because they didn't let their egos get the best of them. To organize and to get people into spaces to win certain things. I do think at this point, whether however you call yourself, either advocate or activist or not, it's at this point it's just about trying to rebuild enough communities that will be able to stick together when shit hits the fan. I don't think I'll be honest, I don't think we'll get there in time because of the fact that there's a lot of people still in a lot of denial right now. And because it doesn't hit certain parts of the country in certain ways, it's going to come as a much bigger shocker to a lot more people when it does start affecting them. And then that's when the chaos ensues. So I'm at least trying to get enough information out there in the meantime to at least plant seeds, and planting those seeds so people, when shit does hit the fan and they are restructuring and rebuilding communities and defending themselves and all these things that will happen, they'll have a little bit of a nugget in the back of their brain that said, oh, that one content creator on social media, she said to build relationships. She said she talked about reciprocal gift economies and what that looks like. Let's try maybe implementing that. Let's sit down with the community and try to do that. So I'm hoping that those little nuggets stick with people as things happen and rebuild, because I just don't think that, I think what people are looking for is this romanticized revolution and a quick fix. And that's not going to happen. This is going to take years of rebuilding. It's going to take years of conflict. It's going to take years of a lot of shit that's going to happen, because we're in this time frame of reclaiming the old worldview, the worldview of indigeneity. We're trying to remove the colonial worldview, which is a task in itself. And too many times we get distracted and argue about a bunch of stuff that we don't need to argue about. Discussions are good because it helps critical thinking, but most people don't want to do discussions. They want to argue. They want to prove that they're right. They want to believe that everything that they're doing is the right thing, and the moral superiority complexes come out. And I think that's where the issue lies in, is because of that. And social media is good and it's bad because you're able to connect with more people and build larger networks and connections. I just did a live the other day on Instagram with an indigenous cousin from Brazil, and had a great 2-hour live where we just kind of discussed and talked about our histories and all of these things, and what was going on in Brazil and what they were facing and what they were dealing with, and so forth. And so these are issues that are global, and we're over here fighting over distractions. Now, I'm not saying that these distractions aren't important conversations, but they're important conversations at certain points in time, not to be had over and over and over again just for views. If it becomes a debate over stupid things, if you're platforming people, and that was one thing I had to learn too with having responsibility to my platform, was, am I going to platform people just to argue? Am I going to platform people just to prove I'm right? Am I going to platform people just to, why am I going to argue with delusional people? So those are things that I had to switch away from in order to be more responsible to the message and not worry about the people who I can't change their minds on. So part of that is going to be the biggest issue. But I'm hoping with more and more people taking in what I'm saying and then using that and expanding that out into their groups, their organizations, their communities, and, challenging people on how to decolonize, then that will at least set the stage, or at least give some kind of seed for people to grow from when shit does hit the fan. But I'll say it all the time: if you're not organizing through defense, it's not going to work. That's the first thing you have to do is you have to have everything defended from your psychology to your physical. And that's where we see everything eventually fails or fizzles out. COINTELPRO was a major thing. The organizations could physically defend themselves, but COINTELPRO is what ultimately took them all out. It took out AIM, it took out the Black Panthers, it took out the Young Lords, it took out the Brown Berets, it took out the Rainbow Coalition. And so it took out the Young Patriots. It took out all of these. And back then, the Young Patriots was actually a civil rights group, not a white supremacy group. So it took out all of these groups because while you were physically capable of defending, you weren't psychologically ready to defend. So that's where people, I think, I'm trying to get people to move towards that. Like, it's why a lot of people get triggered. I'm not trying to like come at your ideology in the form of you're wrong. It's more the form of where are you reproducing colonialism? If you say you're against it, why are you reproducing it? Look at what you're doing. Look at the psychology, and especially to marginalized communities, pay attention to how infiltrators get into your organizations. Like we were talking about General Strike USA. They've had a shit ton of infiltration from the white liberal, right? So like these are the issues. You have to be able to protect against that. And if you can't, the organizing is not going to get where it needs to get.
I wouldn't, to be fair, I wouldn't say it's had a shit ton of infiltration so much as an almost total infiltration. In fact, if it was like in the Matrix when Neo was getting covered by that black goo from the window, the only thing that would be left is an eyeball. So the infiltration is to the max. But
Okay.
you're absolutely right. Absolutely right. No, I'm just joshing you.
I was trying to give some credit, a little credit,
We don't do that around here.
a little credit.
We don't do that. Nope.
Good.
Nope. That
That was
eyeball's
beautiful.
worth. That eyeball's worth that's still left is some of the heads that I talked to. But I'm gonna give them their full credit due. But even they are intelligent enough and dedicated enough to see where the rest of the organization isn't following suit with their lead. So, by the way, this is a 420 friendly space. Please tap the screen and comment, share. And you were saying?
I have to go eat, but I wanted to say thank you, but I didn't want to just vanish, but I wanted to say thank you for this and hosting it. Thank you for the openness for participation. I've missed being a part of these kinds of conversations. And I hope to talk to y'all all soon.
Thank you for coming.
Absolutely. I'll follow you back. Have a good one.
I'm gonna
Well,
be
have a great
adding
rest of y'all's night.
you too. I'm gonna be adding. I mean, I'm always tinkering with the website, but I'm gonna be adding more. And I'm always looking for recommendations. Or I know you're at the forefront. Like I said, we're at the tip of the spears, especially in our various lanes. But both of you guys are just like splendid people. And I have this really horrific trait about me that I do this work because, like my brother was tortured and unalived by the United States government, and he passed away in December. But so I don't have I'm definitely coming at this from like not being a fan of human beings at all. So I'm doing this work for like authentic human beings, not the rest of these fucking clowns. But I honor you guys' work because we don't get the respect. I was just while we were looking up indigenous, I started looking up because I'm still looking for an indigenous directory that can give me like some tribes to promote and stuff like that, and or at least organizations to promote. And it was talking, which is one article I kind of just saw in the Google search way at the bottom as I was scrolling through. It said that the actual boots on the ground activists of anywhere, but specific to the tribes, specific to what we were talking about, Standing Rock, is that they never get, I think you guys touched on it a moment ago, is that the people who are already on the ground doing the work, boots on the ground work, they still get passed by. They don't get any support while they're the ones pioneering, the work. Then some event happens or some spectacle happens, and then everybody's attention is there for a moment, and then all of the fakes show up, stand in the spotlight, get all the credit, and then the movement unalives because the only thing anybody ever saw were these fakes. They never got to see the people who were on the grassroots doing the grassroots work. So when the fakes pulled out, the whole movement essentially fizzled, and not only were the activists already, the boots on the ground activists and the indigenous individuals, the revolutionaries on the ground, left not supported before, they weren't supported during, and then they are left in ruins after. It's so wild.
Every time. It happens all the time. Um, it you'll see it that happen a lot with like the pipeline stuff. A lot of people didn't even know that. I mean, even now, you'll see. I've come across lives where like, where have indigenous people been at when it comes to the civil rights and the activism, and what are they like? They've been out there, like, and then that tells me one of two things: one, you've never been out boots on the ground, or you've only been boots on the ground for your community, and that was it, right? So it's like, and then even with the tribal people, you still have the issues with detribalized people too that aren't being recognized as indigenous movements. On top of then them trying to pit us against each other, the tribal and the detribalized folks. So a lot of distrust that happens even amongst our own communities when it comes to supporting these things. That we even start, you start seeing it, and I've seen it in every single community so far. You start gatekeeping the movement itself, which becomes a problem, right? Because, well, y'all remember when Emily Pike was found, and you had a bunch of supposed allies, content creators, white people that were putting the red handprint over their face. And there was like all this controversy. Now, I know they were doing it more for performative reasons, so I understand that. But then there was like some people who completely took what some people were saying as like, this isn't even for you to even speak on at all. But then how do we get the information out if people aren't speaking on it? I think the better approach to that would be, instead of you shouldn't speak on this, it should be let me give you the right information if you're.
I don't know if it's just me, but you cut out. You cut out.
Preaching shit, I have to hold myself to I have to have a responsibility to my platform, because I'm talking to thousands of people every time I post a video from all over the world. So that, to people I will never meet in my lifetime. And my words are resonating with certain people that holds a lot of weight and responsibility to. So I think that's another issue, is that people demand accountability from everywhere, but they're not even holding themselves accountable or holding a responsibility to their own platforms, because everybody's getting these dopamine bursts from likes and views and followings. And that is seeping into the activism world itself, which is hugely problematic. And that's another issue that I see, is where restructuring into indigenous governance for a lot of these organizations would be very helpful in removing a lot of that ego and performative shit. And it starts to remove the infiltrators, because now the infiltrators don't get a chance to be in charge or have control or dismantle, right?
Full circle.
So, yeah.
The network that I was talking about, the One Great Work Network, there's a lot of awareness of false ego. So that's another reason why I say it's easy to be held accountable there. It's easy to hold others accountable, and they do need more BIPOC people and indigenous content and participation, because like I said, it's just a bulletin board. It helps people be aware. So somebody coming specifically because they heard about Evolving Seeds would then be able to come across yours if they specifically found out if they're specifically engaged in the network, and because they heard about me, but now they're on the network and they see you, because they do live streams where they put everybody's lives videos up to promote, what we're saying, to perpetuate the rhetoric, etc. It allows for you to be able to be seen by people who may not have necessarily come to you, but needed to be geared or guided to you, and then it makes you available. And then whenever you're, when you see something that you relate to in the network and the content, you see some Evolving Seeds content, you share the Great Work Network. There are several content creators that are on there. One of them just went live for the very first time, and almost none of them are on TikTok, especially TikTok lives. There's only like 2 or 3 of them that are on TikTok at all. But this network has millions of supporters. There are a couple dozen on here that follow me, and we communicate, and it's always in the highest equity. It's always with the highest decorum, just like we've had today in here. And so it's just a beautiful interactions. You won't lose more faith in humanity. You'll gain more by interacting with these people. It's really beautiful.
That's dope. I appreciate it. I'll definitely, I did go to the website, so I'll have to check it out a little bit later, but I'm going to go take an hour nap before I start my shift tonight. But
sure.
It's always good talking to you, man. And
You too.
hit me up whenever. Okay.
Hell yeah. Thank you.
All right, have a
Be
good
safe
one.
out there.
You
You
too.
too. So, or I don't even know if you're still here, if you're on your phone call still, but if you are here and you come off of mute before the end of this draggy, slow, stretched out sentence, then you can have the floor. Otherwise, there is something that we do here that I don't always get to do with an audience, that it's pretty provocative. I have my website up, and I guess I'm going to keep that up. But we speak on, and of course you can settle in if you're here. If you've never been introduced to evolvingseeds.com, please subscribe to the website, follow, and all the good things on here. But check out the website. That's where the real nitty gritties is. That's where Thorn, as you see in your background, is Tyranny Hazards Organizing Response Network. If you're somebody who is experiencing deprivation, if you're experiencing disaster, whether natural or man-made in the form of tyranny, we don't have the most resources, but we offer everything we have. We offer all that we can. We do the work. We have a network. We are attached. We are a branch of a larger network of networks of activists and organizations and individuals that are engaging in enabling support, enabling access to resources, information. We've been able to keep people in their homes. We've been able to pay rents, mortgages. We've been able to get hotels for people who were experiencing extreme deprivation. We've been able to pay car notes to keep people on the road. We've been able to put gas in people's tanks, food on people's tables. So if you're somebody who needs assistance, get on there, get on the website. If you're somebody who is already in the networks, your own networks, or in the business of engaging in mutual aid, holla at your boy. Get on the website. And let's see about getting this attached to the Alexa.
Now connected to Chromebook _37E.
You ready? You guys ready?
He was once from around the way. Easy.
And just because you maybe adopt an oppositional stance, rhetorically, or even, in your mind, a critical stance, revolutionary stance, whatever the case may be, you're a dissenter, you're a critic, you're a dissident, etc., you're against the system, you're anti-capitalist, or what have you, you're libertarian, or whatever other sort of ideological position that you take, but that you adopt to position yourself as so-called anti-establishment or even as anti-Western. This is like saying that I'm going to drive my car down a different road than everyone else is driving on. You know? But meanwhile, your car's broken down. 4 flat tires, no gas, no fuel, dead battery. You understand? So you're all on a dead end. You're all on a dead end road. All of you. And they keep telling you that it's a road to paradise. It's the highway to paradise. But it's a dead end. And it doesn't do you any good to even know that it's a dead end. It doesn't do you any good to know that it does not lead to paradise because they have already made sure that your car is broken down. You understand? You're not going forward, you're not going backwards, you're not turning around. No U-turns. You know, you're not taking another road. There's no off-ramp. It doesn't matter even if there was an off-ramp because your vehicle is disabled. And that's your mind, that's your psyche, that's your cognitive abilities. You understand me? That's your civilizational options. You know, you can change gears as much as you want in your broken down car. You can turn your blinkers on, you can turn your turn signal on, all you want. You can put whatever slogans or whatever bumper stickers you want on your broken down car about revolution and what have you. It doesn't matter, your car is not moving. It's not going anywhere. See, they planned ahead. They planned ahead. First they misled you. First they told you that you were on the road to paradise. But they knew that eventually you would expect to arrive at some point at that paradise. And once it becomes obvious that it's not going to, that you're not going to arrive at that paradise, that that's not going to happen, they know that they would have a problem on their hands. So they have been neutralizing you for decades. You know, slashing your tires, emptying your tank,
Thank you for the
cutting your
follow.
wires, right? Crippling your engine, draining your battery, and so forth, and locking your doors from the outside. So now it doesn't matter. Now it doesn't even matter whether you know or not that the road does not lead to paradise that you're on, that American road, or that it's a dead end. It doesn't matter now. It doesn't even matter. You see what I mean? You can sit in your disabled car and you can listen to the radio. That's what you do. Doesn't matter if it's NPR or if it's Top 40. You can listen to a Marxist podcast or you can listen to a evangelical MAGA program. You're not going anywhere either way. I hope you understand me. I hope you understand me, but I don't think you do. I'm not talking about your system. I'm talking about you as a human being boxed in by your system. I'm literally talking about your psyche, about your thinking processes. You understand me? I'm talking about your intellectual options, or the options that you have because of your intellect, or lack thereof, because of the non-stop, relentless programming of your culture. And I'm talking about your character. See, I talked about like community sovereignty, community building, community sovereignty, efficiency zones, and so forth. I talked about building parallel power structures in America as options for people over there. See, this is me telling you about trying ways to circumvent the system that has you boxed in. That's a completely different concept. And when I talk about those things, even when I talk about those things, I know that most people will never make any move in that direction. They won't make the first move, they won't make the smallest move in that direction. But that's a different topic altogether. When I talk about community sovereignty, community building, parallel power structure, and so forth, that's me acknowledging and recognizing that you are the way you are, and even though you are the way you are, because you're still our brothers and sisters in humanity, and frankly, because I have myself a personal connection to the American people, since I am from there, and on some level, I do sympathize. I sympathize with the panic and with the desperation and the feeling of being trapped that everyone feels over there. So I recognize all of that. And because I know the mentality, and I know the mentality, I know what the mentality worries about. And I am personally inclined to try to offer practical suggestions about what you can do to relieve the worries that your particular mentality will have uppermost in your mind. Meaning material security, meaning access to resources, meaning access to services, and the material maintenance of the world as we live. See, I know the mentality, and I accept that you have that mentality. And I want to offer some options that can make sense to that mentality. That's what it is when I talk about community sovereignty, community building, efficiency zones, and so on. I'm talking about your options for circumventing the system over there that's collapsing, surviving the collapse, surviving the collapse of that system as you know it, and navigating the predictable repression that is inevitably coming. But none of that is your real problem. That's the thing. None of that is your real problem. None of that is your fundamental problem. And in fact, your real fundamental problem is, anyway, that's going to prevent you, anyway, from even doing anything that I suggest in regards to community sovereignty and community building. And again, that fundamental problem, your real fundamental problem, is your broken down, flat tire having, no gas having, dead battery American brain. That's your fundamental problem. That's a fact. That's the truth. I'm just telling you the truth. And it doesn't matter how you feel about the system. It doesn't matter how you feel about the system. It doesn't matter if you are oppressed under that system and know that you're oppressed under that system. It doesn't make it doesn't matter if you are discriminated against in that society, in that system, and you know that you are. If you're locked out of upward mobility and you know that you are. If you hate capitalism and you hate corporatism or what have you, it doesn't matter. You understand? None of these things, none of these types of understandings are groundbreaking levels of awareness. You understand me? None of that demonstrates great cognitive realization. None of that demonstrates character. None of that demonstrates morality or principles. You understand me? It does not take a moral genius to recognize when you have been struck upside your head. Knowing that you've been punched in the face is not a profound insight into your situation. You ought to know that. And if you are someone who does not know, who doesn't even know when they've been punched in the face, well, there's nothing I can say for you. I have no suggestions for you. I have no suggestions except you just go right ahead and pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. That's the best kind of citizen you can be, someone that doesn't even know they've been punched in the face. See, I'm saying that recognizing that you're in a bad situation is not, in and of itself, the sign of a particularly astute mind. The question is, do you know why you're in that situation and what are you going to do about it? Those are the relevant questions, and do you even have the mental skills to answer either of those questions? And the answer to that question is no. No, you don't have the mental skills to answer those skills. The damage is done, I'm saying. That's the short version of what I'm saying. You're drowning in the ocean, okay? You're drowning in the ocean, you've been overthrown, you've been thrown overboard, and you're drowning. And you think that the solution to your problems, the solution to your drowning, is to change your shoes. See, I'm saying, the damage is done to your mind, to your psyche, to your character. Now, I said I'm talking about you. I'm talking about the Americans. I'm talking about the Westerners because I have a personal connection and a degree of sympathy because I come from there. That's why I'm talking about this and why I talk about you. But the fact of the matter is that no one in the global South, no one in the Muslim world has any reason whatsoever to be responsible for this. You understand me? No one owes you any sympathy whatsoever. They don't have to be understanding. They don't have to try to help fix your mentality. They don't have to try to rescue you, You understand? They don't have to try to figure out what's wrong with you and help you develop and help you to become a better person, a better society, a better civilization. A slave who is escaping the plantation, running away from the plantation, doesn't stop in his tracks and have second thoughts. Like, maybe master had a difficult childhood. I just need some emotional support or something. That doesn't happen. You have to be crazy. You've been monstrous for the rest of the world for centuries. And you're monstrous right now. So it's absolutely absurd for anyone in America or anyone in the West to expect anyone in the global South to sympathize with you. To ask them what's the solution when the thing that they want, that you want a solution to, is nothing other than the consequences of your own actions as a so-called civilization. You can't ask people in the global South or the Muslim world for a solution. The solution to consequences is just to accept them and face the music. That's the solution to your consequences. You're not the main character in anyone else's life. Truth be told, you're not even the main character in your own life over there. Yes, there is a part of you that talks about you because I come from where you come from. Because I have lived what you are living. And I've been where you are, and I've been what you are. But like I said before, and I've said many times, in the earlier parts of this lecture and elsewhere, I'm not doing anything really but bear witness to the cautionary tale that your so-called civilization is for humanity. I'm trying to caution my own people, the Muslims. Both the Muslims in the diaspora, over there in America, over there in the West, and obviously the Muslims in Dar es-Islam. Because not understanding the reality of our America, not understanding the reality